Imagine launching a single missile, and suddenly the sky fills with dozens or even hundreds of deadly threats. Not because hundreds of missiles were fired, but because one missile just multiplied the attack. This is the frightening concept behind a new generation of weapons that military analysts are watching closely: cluster or multi-payload missile systems. And according to defense reports, Iran may now be deploying missiles capable of turning one launch into hundreds of separate strikes. In modern warfare, missiles are no longer just simple explosives that hit a single target. Some are designed to split apart in midair, releasing multiple smaller warheads or submunitions that spread across a large area. Instead of destroying one target, a single missile can suddenly threaten entire airfields, radar stations, military bases, or missile defense systems at once. This type of weapon dramatically increases the complexity of defending against missile attacks. Because intercepting one missile is difficult, intercepting hundreds of incoming objects at once is exponentially harder. For missile defense systems like Patriot or THAAD, every incoming object must be tracked, calculated, and intercepted within seconds. If a missile splits into dozens of warheads or decoys, air defense radars suddenly face a massive tracking problem. Which targets are real? Which are decoys? Which ones must be intercepted first? Military strategists call this tactic saturation warfare. The goal is not necessarily to make every submunition hit its target. The goal is to overwhelm the defense system so that some of them inevitably get through. Iran has spent decades developing exactly these kinds of asymmetric weapons. Instead of matching the United States plane for plane or carrier for carrier, Iran has focused on missiles, drones, and swarm tactics designed to challenge technologically superior militaries. And some Iranian ballistic missiles already demonstrate advanced maneuverable re-entry vehicles and precision guidance systems. For example, the Fatah 1 reportedly reaches speeds of Mach 1315 and is designed to maneuver during its terminal phase to evade missile defenses. But if Iran now so how can a single missile suddenly turn into dozens, or even hundreds, of separate threats in the sky? The answer lies in a technology known as submunition or cluster payload delivery systems. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles that carry one large warhead designed to hit a single target, these missiles are built with a special internal payload compartment that contains multiple smaller explosive units. Once the missile reaches a certain altitude or position above the battlefield, the payload section opens. Inside, dozens, or sometimes hundreds, of smaller bomblets or submunitions are released. Each of these submunitions spreads outward as they fall toward the ground, covering a large area instead of a single impact point. This transforms one missile into a wide-area attack system. Instead of destroying just one radar station, runway, or military vehicle, the missile can scatter explosives across an entire airfield, missile battery, or troop formation. Some of these submunitions are designed to explode on impact. Others are designed to penetrate armored vehicles before detonating. And in some advanced systems, submunitions may even include sensor-guided explosives that search for specific targets, such as tanks or missile launchers. But the military significance goes beyond simply damaging a larger area. The real strategic effect happens in the air. When the missile releases its payload, radar systems suddenly detect dozens or even hundreds of falling objects. Air defense systems must instantly determine which objects represent real threats. And that decision must be made extremely quickly, because interceptor missiles are expensive and limited in number. If defenders attempt to intercept every object detected on radar, they could quickly exhaust their interceptor stockpiles. This is exactly what missile designers want. By multiplying the number of threats in the sky, the missile forces defenders into a difficult dilemma. Either intercept everything, spending enormous resources in the process, or risk allowing some objects to reach the ground. Military strategists often refer to this tactic as defense saturation. The goal is not just destruction, it is overload. Overload radar systems, overload interceptor missiles, overload decision-making systems inside command centers. And once a defense network becomes overloaded, even the most advanced missile defense system can begin to fail, which is why weapons capable of turning one missile into hundreds of incoming threats. To understand why missiles with multi-payload capabilities are so concerning to military planners, it helps to look at the numbers behind these weapons. Traditional ballistic missiles typically carry a single warhead weighing anywhere from 500 kilograms to more than 1,000 kilograms. When the missile reaches its target area, that warhead detonates in a single explosion. But cluster or multi-payload missiles work very differently. Instead of one large warhead, the payload section contains dozens or even hundreds of smaller submunitions. These submunitions can spread over a wide area, sometimes covering several football fields in size. For example, some cluster warheads used in modern missile systems can release 50 to 200 individual bomblets. Each bomblet may weigh only a few kilograms, but when hundreds of them scatter across a target zone, the destructive coverage becomes enormous. Iran has developed a large arsenal of ballistic missiles over the past 2 decades, including systems such as the Shahab-3, Fateh 110, Zulfagar, and the newer Fateh hypersonic missile. The Fateh 110, for example, is a short-range ballistic missile with a range of roughly 300 kilometers, capable of delivering a payload of around 500 kilograms. More advanced variants like the Zulfagar missile can travel 700 kilometers, allowing them to reach targets across much of the Middle East. Iranian engineers have reportedly experimented with payload designs that allow missiles to release multiple submunitions during the final stage of flight. This type of payload dramatically increases the number of threats a defender must deal with. Instead of tracking one incoming warhead, radar systems might suddenly detect dozens of descending objects. And missile defense systems already face severe limitations. For example, a Patriot PAC-3 interceptor missile can cost between $3 million and $4 million per shot. More advanced interceptors, such as the SM-3 missile used by U.S. Navy destroyers, can cost as much as $12 million per launch. This creates a serious imbalance. If a single missile carrying dozens of submunitions forces defenders to launch multiple interceptor missiles, the cost of defense can quickly exceed the cost of the attack. Military analysts describe this as a cost exchange advantage. In other words, the attacker spends far less money to create the threat than the defender must spend to stop it. And as missile technologies continue evolving, this imbalance may become even more pronounced. Because future missile systems may not just release dozens of threats, they could release hundreds. From a strategic perspective, missiles that can multiply into dozens or hundreds of threats represent a powerful tool in what military analysts call asymmetric warfare. Countries that cannot match the technological or financial resources of a superpower often adopt strategies designed to neutralize their opponent's advantages. Iran has followed this approach for decades. Rather than competing with the United States in building aircraft carriers, stealth bombers, or large fleets of advanced fighter jets, Iran has focused heavily on missiles, drones, and saturation attack strategies. These weapons are cheaper to produce and can be deployed in large numbers. And when used together, they can create serious challenges for even the most advanced defense systems. Missile defense networks like Patriot, THAAD, and naval interceptor systems are incredibly capable, but they were originally designed to deal with a limited number of incoming threats. When dozens of objects appear on radar simultaneously, the problem becomes far more complex. Every object must be tracked, command systems must calculate trajectories, and interceptor missiles must be launched quickly enough to destroy the threat before impact. But interceptor missiles are not unlimited. They must be stored, transported, and replaced after each launch. In some scenarios, a single interceptor may be used against one incoming warhead. But if a missile suddenly releases 50 or 100 separate objects, the defending side may need to launch multiple interceptors, or risk allowing some of those threats to slip through. This is where the strategic advantage begins to shift, because the attacker does not need every submunition to hit its target. They only need a few to penetrate the defense. This concept is known as saturation attack doctrine. The goal is to overwhelm defensive systems with more threats than they can handle at once. Even the most advanced radar systems have limits on how many objects they can track simultaneously. And once those limits are exceeded, the defender may struggle to prioritize which threats are most dangerous. This means that even a highly sophisticated missile defense network can be placed under enormous pressure by relatively inexpensive weapons. From Iran's perspective, this strategy serves several purposes. It increases the likelihood that at least some warheads will reach their targets, it forces opponents to expend expensive interceptor missiles, and it challenges the technological advantage that larger military powers rely on. In modern conflict, sometimes victory does not come from having the most powerful. If missiles capable of multiplying into dozens or even hundreds of threats become widely deployed, the consequences could extend far beyond a single battlefield. They could trigger what many defense analysts describe as a missile defense crisis. For decades, countries like the United States and its allies have invested hundreds of billions of dollars in missile defense systems designed to intercept incoming threats. Systems such as Patriot, THAAD, and naval Aegis. Interceptors form the backbone of these defensive networks. Together, they create layered protection designed to stop missiles at multiple stages of flight. But these systems were primarily designed to intercept a limited number of incoming warheads. When a missile suddenly releases dozens of objects in the sky, the defensive equation changes dramatically. Radar systems must suddenly track far more targets. Command centers must make rapid decisions about which threats are real. And interceptor missiles must be launched quickly enough to neutralize the danger. But interceptor missiles are extremely expensive. A Patriot PAC-3 interceptor can cost roughly $3 to $4 million per missile, while the SM-3 interceptor used by U.S. Navy ships can exceed $10 million per launch. This creates a major economic imbalance. If a single missile costing perhaps $1 million can force defenders to launch multiple interceptor missiles, the defending side may end up spending far more money stopping the attack than the attacker spent launching it. This imbalance becomes even more dangerous when attacks occur in waves. If multiple missiles release dozens of submunitions each, the number of objects appearing on radar could quickly reach the hundreds. Even the most advanced missile defense networks can struggle to handle that scale of saturation. And this is why military planners around the world are increasingly concerned about the future of missile defense. Because if multi-payload missiles become more common, existing defensive systems may need to evolve rapidly. New technologies such as directed energy weapons, laser defenses, and advanced AI-driven radar systems are already being developed to deal with these kinds of threats. But those technologies are still emerging, which means that, for the moment, many defense networks remain vulnerable to saturation attacks. And if this type of weapon spreads to more countries, it could reshape how missile warfare is fought across the globe. Not just in the Middle East, but in every region where missile defense plays a critical role in national security. In the end, the real significance of missiles that can turn one attack into hundreds of threats is not just about technology, it is about how the rules of warfare are changing. For decades, military power was defined by large, expensive systems. Aircraft carriers, stealth bombers, advanced fighter jets, and highly sophisticated missile defense networks became symbols of strategic dominance. Nations that could build these systems held enormous advantages on the battlefield, but modern warfare is increasingly challenging that model. Today, relatively inexpensive technologies, drones, cyber attacks, electronic warfare, and multi-payload missiles are capable of disrupting systems that cost billions of dollars to build. Instead of matching the most powerful military's weapon for weapon, some countries are developing strategies designed to overload and outmaneuver those systems. Missiles that release dozens or even hundreds of submunitions are one example of this shift. Their purpose is not simply to destroy a single target. Their purpose is to create chaos in the sky. When radar screens suddenly fill with dozens of incoming objects, defenders are forced into a race against time. Command centers must determine which threats are real. Missile defense systems must decide how to allocate their interceptors. And every decision must be made within seconds, because ballistic missiles can travel thousands of kilometers in a matter of minutes. In that kind of environment, even a small delay can be catastrophic. This is why weapons designed to overwhelm defenses are becoming increasingly important. They exploit one of the biggest vulnerabilities in modern military systems: capacity limits. Every radar system can track only a certain number of objects. Every interceptor battery has a limited number of missiles ready to launch. And every command center has a finite ability to process information during a crisis. If those limits are exceeded, the entire defensive network can begin to struggle. This does not mean missile defense becomes useless. Far from it. Systems like Patriot, THAAD, and Aegis interceptors remain among the most advanced defensive technologies ever developed. They have successfully intercepted ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones in real combat situations. But weapons designed to multiply threats in the sky force